Fargo officers used a lot of restraint arresting rape suspect Kedrick Baker at the homeless camp just north of the Main Avenue Bridge after 6 o'clock on Saturday evening. Reading from the criminal complaints incident report, this is what happened with the names of officers and witnesses omitted. Quote, officers arrived in the area and stopped at a camp just north of the Main Avenue Bridge off the bike path on the river. Walked into camp and announced myself as a Fargo officer. I saw a black male with orange underwear and dark shorts down past his buttocks on top of a female in a position with her hands near her head, appearing to almost lay on top of her while she was on the ground face down. It appeared the male had his pelvic region pushed up against the female's backside. Identified the male as Kedrick Baker from previous encounters with him. When the male got up, I could hear the female start to scream, and I could see that she was face down with her pants down. Kedrick Baker had been on top of the female. As Baker got up, he postured towards me, the officer, and was walking aggressively at me while flexing and yelling. The officer drew a service weapon and pointed it toward Baker and gave commands to show me his hands and get on the ground. Baker continued to walk towards the officer in an aggressive manner. Baker continued to follow the officer out of the camp area to the bike path while the officer was walking backwards, facing toward him. The officer continued to give commands to have Baker show him his hands and get on the ground, which he disregarded and continued to walk toward the officer. Baker stated multiple times while flexing and walking toward the officer that he was not going to get on the ground. At that time, the officer holstered his firearm and drew his taser. After another command for Baker to get on the ground and disobeying it, the officer discharged one bay of the taser probes. This did not affect Baker and he appeared to rip the taser probes and started to advance toward the officer again. The officer deployed his second bay of taser probes, striking Baker. These appeared to stop him for a second, but he continued to disobey commands to get on the ground. Another officer arrived, and Baker still refused commands and again started to advance toward officers. The other officer deployed another set of taser probes at Kedrick. After being struck again, Kedrick sat down on the path but still refused to roll into his stomach so that they could detain him. Baker eventually rolled onto his stomach and was given commands to put his hands behind his back, which he refused. We were eventually able to get both of his arms behind his back and place him in handcuffs. One officer stayed with Kedrick while the other officer went to check on the female victim. The officer called for 2 ambulances for Baker and the female. The female was on the ground crying, still with her pants down. The female identified herself. She stated, "He tried to suffocate me," referring to Baker. She stated that she and Baker were the only ones in the camp and that he also raped her friend. Again, that's from the incident report from the criminal complaint. Kedrick Baker now facing felony charges of gross sexual imposition, attempted gross sexual imposition, felonious restraint, preventing arrests, and lesser drug charges. I'm Neil Carlson reporting for iNewZ.TV.